Is Bearing Buddy really your buddy? Well, I'm going to say that if used correctly on the right application, Bearing Buddy can definitely be your buddy, can keep you out of a tight spot, can be a good friend to you. So we're going to show how to properly install this and how to do maintenance on it. I'm going to go ahead and apologize in advance for the fan noise here in the back. We're going to try to do without of it, but it is hotter than a $10 weed eater at the pawn shop. So we're just going to have to all get along and run the fan because it's hot, simple as that. Today we're going to be installing the Bearing Buddy on a 3,500 pound axle. We're going to be putting that on a 5-on-4.5 idler hub. Once we get everything installed, we will talk about this. We'll talk about how to properly install it, how to properly maintain it. We'll talk about the Bearing Buddy bra as well. If you see down here, if we can pull the camera down, this is a 3,500 pound beam that I had laying around on the rack. Had a lot of rust on it. We cleaned it up as best as we could so we can use this as an illustration. So the first thing we're going to do, we're going to install the bearing and the seals. We're going to get the hub prepped. This would be a scenario if you were doing maybe a complete teardown, bearing inspection, and a repack. At the end of the video, we'll show you how to just do everyday maintenance when towing with a Bearing Buddy, and then we'll talk about some of the different uses and different applications it's got. So let's grab our stuff, let's go to the workbench, and let's put this hub together. So today we're going to assemble this hub. We're going to put the inner bearing in and the outer, but we're not going to put any grease in it. There is some lubrication on the races, but very minimal, so it's not a completely dry contact. The reason I'm going to do it dry is we're going to pump it full of grease. I want to see how well it lubricates the bearings, how well it packs it. If you were doing this under general maintenance, the same as I would, once we tore this down, did an inspection, we would go ahead and pre-pack those bearings with our bearing packer, go ahead and put some grease in the hub, install it, put the Bearing Buddy on, and then completely fill it up to Bearing Buddy spec, just to save a little time. But we will fast forward through all the grease pumping, but I just want to see what it will do. Once we get done, we'll pull it down and we'll do an internal inspection on the bearings and just see how good of a job it does. So the first thing we're gonna do is we're gonna take the inner bearing, we're gonna put it in place. And if you'll notice on this seal, this is a steel seal or an aluminum, depending on what you get. Some of these are coated. Some of these are made out of different materials, but since this is shiny and raw, we're gonna put a sealant on here just to help keep water out. And we're gonna talk a little bit more about water here shortly. I'm just gonna use a black RTV. You can use whatever brand you like. Permatex is a great brand. Just a good high quality sealant. And it doesn't have to be black. Just try to keep it on this surface, and you don't need a lot. It's a very tight fit already. It's a friction fit, so like I said, if you order marine seals, a lot of them are already coated in some form of silicone or plastic, so you would not have to do that. So we're gonna put that in. I'm gonna take a paper towel, wipe our excess silicone off, and y'all are gonna meet me back over at the beam, and we're gonna put this hub on. Like I said earlier, we are gonna put this together dry just so we can see how good of a job it does, but I am gonna put just a minimal amount of grease on here just to help the bearing slide over. If you'll notice, I have my gloves on. If you ask, why are you wearing gloves? Well, I had a viewer make a comment here a while back about needing to protect my hands. I appreciate that comment. Thanks for the reminder. Even I remembered and learned something today, which I'm kind of like an old dog. Sometimes it's hard for me to learn new tricks. I know I should be wearing my gloves. You should be wearing your gloves too. I try to get better about that. I preach it to our guys, but sometimes we get in the do as I say, not as I do attitude. So thank you for that comment. I'm gonna try to keep my gloves and my hands clean the rest of the day. We're just gonna slip this on. Just like that. We're gonna grab the outer bearing. Like I said, we're just doing this for demonstration purposes. This is not going into service, not going into the field. If you want to know how to do a regular bearing pack and how to properly tighten the spindle nut and how to take slack out of it, we'll leave a link in the description below to a video for that. It's pretty useful, hopefully, to you. I'm not even gonna put the cotter key in this because we're gonna take it all the way back apart. So now we're gonna put the Bearing Buddy on. I like to put a small amount of sealant around this. Some marine applications, if you're not using the Bearing Buddy system, Some of them require Loctite. Some of them have kind of moved away from Loctite and they're going to an RTV sealant, which is what we're gonna be using today. Just remember, don't overdo it. Doesn't need much. It is a very, very tight seal. If you get it on the inside, just make sure you get it out. We do keep some dust cap, grease cap, and we even have some installers that we've made for Bearing Buddy, for vault systems. But today I'm going to use a block of wood. That's what they're going to tell you to use in the instructions. A good solid block of wood will go on easy. You're more likely to have that later in the house. So that's the method we'll use today. And just kind of look at it as you're going on. Try to stay as even as possible. You'll know when it bottoms out. You won't have a gap, and it will kind of change sounds. A word to the wise is sufficient when putting the sealant here, whether that be RTV or Loctite, especially if it requires a Loctite installation. Do not have your face directly above that. When it does completely marry in, it will spray all the excess out. It did a little silicone there, but you do not want to get silicone or Loctite in your eyeballs. I assume you'll be wearing your eye pro. So if you have that on, it may save you, but just don't put your face over it. So now that we have it installed, we're ready to pump grease into it. So again, this is completely dry, so it's gonna take a minute. I'm not gonna make you watch me pumping the grease gun and possibly getting mad and cussing the grease gun because it's taking too long. But one thing I do want to stress, Bearing Buddy is gonna stress it in the instructions as well. Only use a manual grease gun. Do not use a pneumatic or an electric. We have both here at the shop. We're not gonna use that. We're gonna use a manual grease gun. I have this filled with a marine grade grease. Some of your red high temp grease do meet the marine specifications, but just check your owner's manual that you got with the trailer to make sure you put the proper grease spec. Most of your marine greases will be fine and will meet spec. So we're gonna hook that up to the grease zerk and we're gonna go to pumping and we'll be done in 2 or 3 days probably. This is gonna take a lot of grease because remember, it's completely dry. So I've been pumping for a while, and as you're pumping and doing this method with everything dry, no grease in there, what you're gonna have is a lot of air. I'm gonna pump a little more. You'll see this pressure relief valve pop out. You're gonna see some grease come out, and I'm gonna show you how to relieve some of the air. Like I said, just take your time and go slow. It is bleeding air out. And you will get some grease coming out. When you get the grease coming out, that's not a bad thing. That doesn't mean you broke anything. That usually means you're full. I'm gonna say on this, I doubt very seriously this is full. I believe it probably still has some air in it. And what I did a few times while I was doing it is wipe my grease back, wiggle the cap, and you will hear and feel some air coming out of it, and the piston will depress back in and won't be so extruded. I do like to spin it around while I'm filling it too. That may or may not do anything, but it makes me sleep better at night. So it is okay for there to be some grease on the outside. So as I said earlier, I do not recommend filling it dry. I only did this to see how good of a job it did. We're gonna tear this down here shortly. I recommend pre-packing the bearings, putting some grease in the hub, then installing the cap, then topping it off from there. Once we tear this down, I will show you how to do a quick bearing pack with your palm if you don't have one of the grease bearing packers. We'll leave a link to what we use, but you can do it the old-fashioned way. So let's take this Bearing Buddy off. We're gonna pull down the spindle and we're gonna inspect the bearings and see how much grease we've got in there. So the proper way to take the Bearing Buddy out, like I said, it's a very tight friction fit. Do not hammer directly on the Bearing Buddy, especially up around this bevel. You could bend it. You could keep the spring from working correctly. Take a block of wood and just tap it and kind of walk it out. And just take your time. You can see the grease that we have in there. So let's pull the nut, washer, and outer bearing off. As you can see there, we do have some void, so we are not completely packed. I've never tried this method. I just wanted to do it just to see what we come up with. So let's pull it out and see how much grease we have in. So we have some grease. So if we'd have kept pumping, we'd probably put some more in there. Let's see if we can get the camera. Can you get a shot deep down in there? The inner bearing has no grease in it. So that inner bearing is still dry. So doing it this method, you can do it. You can bleed the air off, pump grease, bleed air off, pump grease, bleed air off, pump grease. It's gonna take you forever. Pre-pack the bearings, put you some grease in there, and that's what we're gonna do now. So I'm gonna rip this seal out. I'm gonna show you how to do a quick hand pack on this bearing, and we'll put it back together. So we're gonna do the palm packing method, which has been around forever. I learned how to do this as a child on our early, late 70s Ford and Chevrolet pickups. You're gonna get you a dollop. I guess dollop would be the term. You're gonna take this and you're just going to scrape the grease. And I'll show you in a minute. After you've done this several times, you will want to look into getting a handy packer. I promise you, this will make your hands sore. The old school guys that taught me this, I promise you, never wore a glove. Their hands were rough. They may have been grease proof at that time. And they may also not have any nerve endings left to realize how irritating this can be to your palm. It doesn't take a long time to do this, but there are definitely easier ways to do it. Not better, but easier, and easier is not always better. So basically you want to go until it starts coming out the upper part. This is completely packed. It is ready to install. But what I'm going to do, again, we have to fill this complete hub cavity full of grease. So I'm going to go ahead and cheat. I'm going to go ahead and get a head start because I don't want to be here all night on the grease gun. You can put too much in here. And if that's the case, it is going to blow it out, the bearing buddy. But remember, it does have pressure relief. So you're technically, they say you can't overgrease it. Technically, you can overgrease it, but the pressure relief is protecting you so it doesn't cause any damage and blow out the rear seal. That's what they mean by that. Before putting that inner seal in with all this grease, you're gonna wanna wipe all the excess off, take you some brake clean, spray it on the rag, wipe the interior of the seal mating surface down, put the silicone on your seal, and then install your seal. So as you can see, I've cheated. I have put some grease in there. You can put too much in there, and when you go to slide it on the spindle, if you put too much, you know, because it's gonna push it out the front. Just be prepared, catch it if you got a clean glove, and you can reuse that grease. You don't have to waste it. Just put it on slow, that way it has time to evacuate any air. So we're gonna slip this on. I'm gonna go ahead and put some grease down in there. So we did have grease in the bearing earlier, but I went ahead and hand packed it just like I did on the rear, just to be on the safe side. So now we're gonna put the nut back on, do a little cleanup, and reinstall the cap. Quick question for you. Are you an over-greaser or an under-greaser? Which is it? Which have you ever been guilty of? Which has cost you the most money? Over-greasing or under-greasing? Leave that in the comments when you go to click the subscribe, give us a thumbs up, or leave us a comment. Leave that one down there too. Just tell me what you do. Also, remember to check the comments for some links. We'll leave some stuff to go find you Bearing Buddy products, some seals, and maybe some other components on there. Also, check out the description for some other videos related to this. Let's tighten this nut up and let's finish off this Bearing Buddy install. So now we've got grease for days. I do like to wipe the excess grease off around the nut, and usually you can just stick a rag in there, spin it, and then I will take a clean rag with some brake clean on, not where it's dripping, just the rag is wet. I will stick the rag in there, spin it just to clean that inner mating surface off like we did in the rear. So when we reapply the Bearing Buddy on there, we got a good waterproof seal. I'm not gonna do that for this video because I'm gonna take this all back apart. So let's put the Bearing Buddy back on. You can fill this almost completely full of grease, but I'm gonna tell you, I leave a little space in there because you do have the nut protruding out. So if you have it completely full, it's gonna immediately shoot it out the front, or you're gonna shoot it out the back. So I fill it up just maybe below that outer ring. My friend out there that told me I needed better shop rags, I completely agree. We only use these for smearing grease around. We do keep some good wipe all and regular shop rags around for everything else. I just use these just for grease. One of these days I'll step up maybe and get me some good rags. So we're gonna push that around, see if we can alleviate any air. So now we've evacuated the air. You can see it was rocking really easy before. Now it's tight. When you read the instructions, if that is tight and you can't push on it, there is not enough grease in there. You do not have positive pressure. So once we put the grease gun back on there, this is going to extrude out a little bit. It will evacuate some grease and some air, which is perfectly normal. You're just going to wipe off the excess grease and it will be complete. So now I can feel pressure on the piston coming towards me. And we're going to go until we get some grease and some air. I can already hear the air coming out. But there. So now we have grease coming out. So see how you can rock that? That means it's completely full. The spring is working. You now have positive pressure, and what that positive pressure is for, when this gets warm, it's going to keep pressure on there. When you go to pull in the water, it's not going to allow water to go in from the heat difference. It's going to keep the water pressed out. So that being said, what do I recommend bearing buddies for? I recommend them mainly for the marine industry. Whatever kind of trailer that is, whatever kind of water you're going in, fresh or salt, that's really my main recommendation. I do not recommend the bearing buddy setup for regular, everyday utility trailer purposes. I'm also not a big fan of the Easy Lube. That being said, if you want to use either one of those, that doesn't make you a bad operator or a bad person. If you utilize these and maintain them correctly, they will serve you just fine. In the Easy Lube industry, it is approved for submersion. So you can use an Easy Lube axle the same as you can use this. You can back it in the water. That's really the main purpose behind it. And if you watch our video on the Easy Lube, you can repack your bearings without taking the hub down. If you're one of the undergreaser or overgreaser guys, that may not be proper maintenance. It may not work for you. The other application I would say this is useful in, maybe you live in a cold climate, you live somewhere where you're pulling a snowmobile around, you have salt, water, slush on the road. This will work good for that. It will keep the moisture out as well. In those applications, just like if you're in salt, I recommend getting the stainless steel. This is a nickel plated. It's just not gonna last as long, or you get some corrosion. So just go ahead and spend the extra money. And when you purchase one, make sure it is the stainless steel. So clean this up as much as possible. When you get all the bulk grease out of here, it's not gonna hurt anything to leave it. It's just gonna sling it everywhere and it's gonna collect crap. So get all you can out. I will take a rag, spray this down with brake clean, wipe everything down nice and neat. Now let's talk about when to check this. So after you've done a bearing repack or you just topped it off, when you hook onto your trailer and you're headed to the lake, before you back this down into the water, now that the bearings have some heat on it, maybe you have a brake system, and we're gonna touch on that here shortly, they have some heat on it, you need to check the level of this. If it's pushed in and it's not rocking anymore, you're gonna need to go ahead and add some grease to that before you back down to the water, because if you don't, if it's pressed in and doesn't have positive pressure, it is likely going to suck water in. I recommend carrying a small pistol grip grease gun with you that you can use on here. You can also use that on some of your inboard and outboard components that require grease. So it's handy to have around, but just go ahead and check that. Make sure you don't need to top it off before you back it into the water. And really, you need to check it almost every time you go. I know that's maybe been a little over the top, but it's better to check it and to be safe than sorry and be broke down on the side of the road. Let's touch on brakes. So the purpose of this pressure relief is to keep you from over-greasing by not blowing the seal out of the back. If you had brakes on here, whether they be hydraulic, whether they be disc, If you blow the grease out the back and you get grease on them, they are not going to operate. Or if it's a drum setup, you can catch on fire by doing that. So Bearing Buddy does offer specialty seal kits for pretty much every hub application. If you're going to be using brakes, it's just a little nicer seal than the double lip seal. So I'd recommend checking into that just so you don't accidentally blow that seal out the back. But these Bearing Buddies are nice. If used properly, they will keep you from doing that. So once you get all the grease wiped off, and I'm not going to make it perfect because I'm going to disassemble this and reuse it on one of our trailers. Here comes the Bearing Buddy bra. The original intent for this is two purposes: to keep crap from getting in there, but for you over-greasers out there, if you put this on and you do get some grease coming out, it's not going to sling it all over the wheel. So it was really kind of designed for the over-greasers. The overachievers, remember, a little do a little good, a lot do a lot of good, but that's what it was for. But now with the pressure relief, you still may get a little leakage coming out. The bra is going to capture that, and it's also going to keep all the road grime and the junk out of there and keep your grease dirt nice and clean, and the inside of that nice and clean. So as I asked you before, is a Bearing Buddy your buddy? Is it your friend? If used in marine applications, used correctly, I have no problem with this. I highly recommend it. We install them for customers, and there's other brands out there. This is not sponsored by Bearing Buddy. I bought these just like we'd buy any of our parts. There's some other brands out there. I prefer the Bearing Buddy. I just think the quality on it is maybe a little better than some of the others. I'd say it's a lot better than a few of the others. So I really like them. You can find them. We'll leave a link. Just get it to your size, whether that's a 3,500 pound, 52, 6K, 7K, and I believe they even go up to maybe an 8K in some applications. You'll have to check that out. So I hope that was helpful. Remember to leave us a comment. Remember to put the proper amount of grease and tighten your lug nuts and check your tire pressure, and we will see you on the next one.